The bruise on my daughter Scarlett's arm, only 8 years old, spoke volumes she couldn't yet put into words. I stood frozen in the gleaming, cold living room of the Campbell estate, a pristine 3-story home nestled in the upper-class neighborhood of Meadow Ridge. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the kind of pretension I'd long grown familiar with. "Scarlett, you should apologize to Evan right now," her grandmother, Carol Campbell, said, in a voice sweet like artificial syrup. Scarlett looked at me with wide, watery eyes, still clutching her injured arm. "She provoked him," Carol added, flashing that polite smile I had feared for years. "Evan only reacted like a normal boy would." That normal boy, Carol's 10-year-old golden child, privately educated and raised like royalty, had shoved my daughter to the ground, twisted her arm, and then stood smirking as if nothing had happened when people arrived. I had once tried to keep the peace, for my child's sake, wanting Scarlett to have some connection with her father's family after I divorced Jason Campbell 2 years ago. But in that moment, watching my daughter tremble with fear, tears streaming down her cheeks as she was pressured to apologize to the boy who hurt her, I knew I had stayed silent for far too long. No one in that house understood that my silence wasn't weakness. It was the buildup. The storm that hadn't yet screamed but was already rising in crashing waves inside me. I walked over, knelt beside my daughter, and gently raised her arm to get a better look. The red fingerprint marks wrapped around her tiny wrist felt like a slap across every ounce of restraint I'd ever held on to. "What happened, Scarlett?" I asked, my voice frighteningly calm. She just shook her head, eyes brimming. Carol tried again. "Penelope, don't blow this out of proportion. She's being dramatic. That arm is fine. Kids play rough. It's normal." I stood, looked directly into Carol's carefully made-up eyes. "No, this is not play. And forcing my daughter to apologize when she's the one hurt is just wrong. Penelope, you're overreacting. You've always been too sensitive, too dramatic," she scoffed. I didn't answer. I didn't argue. I just grabbed Scarlett's hand, picked up our bag and coats, and led her toward the door. "She's supposed to stay through the weekend, isn't she?" "It's family weekend," Jason, my ex-husband, said as he descended the stairs, voice flat, as if none of this mattered. "Katie?" I turned, not bothering to hide my anger. "Plans have changed. She's coming with me, and if anyone in your family lays a hand on her again, I won't be handling it with words." "Penelope?" I stopped at the doorway, my gaze sharp as glass. "Final warning. I will not let anyone teach my daughter that being hurt is her own fault." Outside, rain had started falling, each droplet tapping the car windshield like the pounding of my uneasy heart. I buckled Scarlett in and gently brushed her hair from her face. "You don't have to apologize to anyone, sweetheart, especially not someone who hurt you." Scarlett let out a tiny sob, then nodded. I started the engine, my chest tight. I knew the fight had only just begun, but this time, I wasn't backing down. "Oh, my name is Penelope Jameson, a freelance illustrator living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs of Redwood, Oregon. After my divorce from Jason Campbell 2 years ago, I became a single mom, juggling deadlines, school meetings, and raising Scarlett with a love that was equal parts fierce and anxious. When we got married, Jason seemed like the image of a responsible businessman. Calm, charming, from a prestigious family. His family owned Campbell Holdings, a chain of investment and real estate companies stretching across the western United States. When we were dating, I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. After the wedding, I realized it was just a velvet-wrapped silence contract. The Campbell family never truly saw me as one of them. Behind my back, they called me the art girl, scoffing when I talked about the children's book illustrations I was working on. "She paints with watercolors," I once overheard Carol sneering at a cocktail party. "Definitely not the kind of woman who fits a Campbell heir." And Jason? He wasn't cruel, just spineless. In front of his family, he stayed quiet when I was criticized. With me, he'd brush it off. You need to stop taking things so personally. Every time I tried to stand up for Scarlett, he'd say, I grew up in this environment and I turned out fine. That was what scared me the most, because he really believed it. When Scarlett was born, I hoped a child would bridge the gap between me and the Campbells. But reality hit harder. Carol wanted to train her granddaughter her way, strict, silent, and submissive. Children should be seen, not heard. Our visits to their house became days of Scarlett curling up like a soaked kitten. I once found something Scarlett had written in her notebook. I want to disappear every time Evan yells at me, but Grandma says I have to learn to endure it. I'd brought it up with Jason. He shrugged and said, kids exaggerate sometimes. Don't make it a big deal. And me? I stayed silent, because I still believed that keeping a family intact was what's best for the child. I was wrong. Our marriage didn't end over an affair or some massive argument. It unraveled day by day, crushed beneath layers of quiet disdain and the unspoken rules of a family that prided itself on tradition. Divorcing Jason didn't set me free completely. The sentence of cohabitation had ended, but the sentence tying my daughter to the Campbell household hadn't. Per our custody agreement, Scarlett still had to spend every other weekend at her grandmother's house, and I, like every other divorced mom, could only pray my child would be okay each time she went back. I started noticing things. After weekends with them, Scarlett grew quieter. She drew only in black and gray. Once, I saw her sitting in front of the mirror, whispering, I'm not weak. I'm not weak. When I asked her about it, she just shook her head. Nothing. I'm just tired. I began to doubt myself again. Was I imagining things? Was I being too sensitive, just like Jason and his mother used to say? Until today, the day Evan bruised my daughter's arm, and her grandmother made her apologize to the boy who hurt her. Every last shred of doubt was washed away like a flood. They had crossed the line. I had tolerated being belittled, but I would never forgive them for forcing my daughter to learn silence in the face of violence. Scarlett sat curled up on the sofa, her tiny hands gripping a charcoal gray fleece blanket. The living room light was soft, and the faint smell of chamomile tea floated through the air, but it couldn't ease the storm tightening in my chest. I turned back, sat beside her, and asked in the gentlest voice I could muster, Scarlett, do you want to tell Mommy what happened today? She was quiet for a long while, then suddenly her voice trembled as she said, Evan grabbed my arm because I didn't give him the toy car, and then he said if I told any grown-ups I was a snitch snake. I clenched my fists, but kept my voice calm. Has something like this happened before? Scarlett nodded, and then, like water bursting through a broken dam, she began to speak. Pound time, he locked me in the shed outside. It was pitch dark, I couldn't see anything, and I screamed, but no one opened the door. Afterward, Grandma said I went in there myself and got stuck. She told me not to make a fuss. I didn't want her to be mad, so I stayed quiet. I felt like the world around me was collapsing. Evan also pushed me down the greenhouse steps. My knee was bleeding, but I had to tell Dad I'd tripped because if I told the truth, Grandma said I wouldn't be allowed to come back. Each word Scarlett said was a fresh cut to my soul. I sat there, trying to keep my face from contorting with rage, not wanting to scare her, but inside I knew I had let my daughter endure this for far too long. That night, after Scarlett had fallen asleep from exhaustion, I pulled out my phone and took photos of the remaining bruises on her arm. I documented everything she'd told me in a separate file, carefully, clearly, and truthfully. The next morning, I called Claire Monroe, a former classmate and now one of the most respected child advocacy attorneys in the county. We hadn't spoken in years, but I had no other choice. Penelope, she answered, surprised. Claire, I need you. And I need you to be honest with me. Am I overreacting? After I told her everything, there was a long pause. Then Claire replied, her voice firm. "No, you're not overreacting. You're doing what you should have done a long time ago. And, starting today, I'm with you." We got to work that same week. Claire guided me on how to document every detail: behavioral changes in Scarlett after weekends with her grandmother, any scrapes or bruises, emotional shifts. I began collecting photos, journal entries, messages with the Campbell family, anything that might demonstrate a pattern of behavior. We also reached out to Miss Allen, Scarlett's third-grade teacher. She admitted, "Scarlett's been unusually quiet since the start of this semester. She doesn't raise her hand anymore, doesn't play with friends like she used to." When I asked if she'd noticed anything different after Scarlett returned from weekends away, Miss Allen hesitated, then said, "There have been a few drawings in art class, ones that don't look like her usual work." She showed me one that Scarlett had drawn 3 weeks prior, a little girl standing in a pitch-black room surrounded by looming adult figures with glowing red eyes. In the corner of the drawing, Scarlett had written, "They told me to be quiet." I held the paper with trembling hands. The ache in my chest was no longer sorrow. It had turned into fire. Claire suggested I take Scarlett to see a child psychologist, and we chose Dr. Megan Bell, who had extensive experience working with children who had suffered emotional and physical abuse. After 2 evaluation sessions, Dr. Bell spoke candidly. "Scarlett shows many signs of repeated trauma. Her reactions are especially intense when Evan and Mrs. Carroll are mentioned. And most importantly, when asked where she feels safe, her only answer was, 'At home with my mom.'" That night, I sat alone, staring at the documents spread across the table. Photos, notes, Scarlett's statements, drawings, psychological assessments, and the teacher's reports. All of it came together like a painfully clear picture. Scarlett had been intimidated, belittled, and forced into silence in a home that should have been her safest refuge outside of mine. I emailed the entire case file to Claire, along with one simple sentence: "Are we ready to begin?" The response came within 5 minutes. "Yes, and be ready, because I promise you, this time the truth won't be buried." I had thought that after presenting our evidence and Scarlett's statements, the Campbell family would back down and reflect on their actions. But no, they struck back as if they'd been preparing for it all along. Just 3 days after Claire submitted the official petition requesting an investigation into custody and emotional abuse, I received a warning letter from the Campbell family's legal office, authorized by none other than Scarlett's grandfather, Robert Campbell. They were seeking full custody, accusing me of psychologically harming Scarlett through fabrication, sowing resentment, and interfering with her relationship with her paternal family. They even claimed I was mentally unfit to be a single mother. My hands trembled with anger as I held the letter. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I forwarded the entire file to Claire and continued preparing. Their next tactic was to smear my name in the community. An anonymous post appeared on the Redwood Neighborhood Forum, insinuating that I was a mentally unstable mother, erratic, and regularly on antipsychotic medication. The rumors spread like wildfire. Friends at the art gallery where I freelanced started receiving quiet warnings. My neighbor Rachel, the one who often watched Scarlett during my busiest days, suddenly texted to say she couldn't help anymore, no reason given. "Penelope, I'm sorry. I just don't want to get involved in this." I understood. They were playing the isolation card, pushing me to the fringes, trying to weaken me until I had no one left. But they miscalculated. One Friday afternoon, I received an email from an unfamiliar name, Lana Brooks. "Hello, Penelope. I used to be a nanny for the Campbell family 2 years ago. I know what's going on, and I'm willing to speak up." We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown. Lana, a 27-year-old originally from Louisiana, had curly red hair and eyes that shimmered with exhaustion. "I once saw Evan push another little boy down the back stairs," she told me. "The boy had to get 8 stitches on his forehead, but Mrs. Carroll told his parents he slipped, and afterward, they got a tuition assistance check." Lana showed me screenshots of her messages with the Campbell family's house manager, including one where Carol instructed, "Say nothing to the press. Remind them of the confidentiality clause in the agreement." Claire immediately added this evidence to the case file. A few days later, another unexpected person came forward. Miss Mallory, Scarlett's former music teacher. She asked to meet at the school and brought with her a drawing Scarlett had turned in nearly a year ago. The picture showed a little girl inside a bird cage, with a boy holding the key outside, and the shadow of an adult looming behind them. Scrawled in the corner were the words, "They told me not to speak." I remember thinking it was odd, but I didn't understand at the time. "Now I do," Ms. Mallory said. "If you need my testimony, I'm here." That night, as I organized the updated case file, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm Beatrice, the mother of a girl who was locked in the attic cabinet by Evan last year. We signed a non-disclosure agreement after accepting a psychological support payment from the Campbells, but after seeing your daughter's bruised arm, I can't stay silent. I will testify." Claire could hardly believe the evidence I forwarded her. "Pen, this is the turning point. You've not only shown that Evan's behavior is repeated, but you've uncovered the Campbell family's cover-up system." But what shocked me the most was a brief email sent from an anonymous address. "Judith Campbell asked me to delete the main house's security footage, but the new system saves everything straight to the cloud. I can't show my face, but you need to see this." Attached was a link to a video clip. It showed Scarlett being shoved in the rock garden behind the mansion. Evan was laughing gleefully, and Mrs. Carroll, standing right next to them, did absolutely nothing. I sat frozen, heart pounding like war drums, my hands ice cold. Finally, this wasn't just about words, not just bruises. Now I had the truth. On video. Claire called right after watching the footage. "We're filing for an emergency hearing. With this clip, they won't be able to hide anymore." But I knew this was only the beginning, because a family like the Campbells wouldn't back down easily. The email arrived at 2 a.m. while I was sitting beside Scarlett, gently brushing her hair to soothe her back to sleep after a sudden nightmare. The subject line read only one word: truth. I opened it with trembling hands. The link led to a video less than 2 minutes long, with a short message. "I can't come forward, but Scarlett deserves to be protected." I hit play. The screen lit up with a familiar view, the rock garden behind the Campbell estate. Scarlett was sitting on the stone steps, playing with an old rabbit statue, while Evan stood nearby, clutching a ball. Suddenly, Evan hurled the ball and hit Scarlett in the head, knocking her backward. As she tried to get up, Evan rushed over and twisted her arm. Scarlett screamed. And what stunned me into silence, Mrs. Carol Campbell was standing right there, just a few steps away, holding her teacup. She did not intervene. She didn't run over, didn't scold, didn't move. When Scarlett began to cry, Evan withdrew and smirked. Mrs. Carroll gave a quick glance, then turned away. I felt my heart seize up. It was irrefutable, no longer hearsay, no longer crayon drawings or a child's testimony. This was raw truth, unedited, unmistakable. I sent the video to Claire with a single message. "We have our weapon." 3 hours later, before the sun had even risen, my phone rang. Claire spoke fast, as if she'd downed 3 cups of coffee. "Pen, I've filed an emergency motion with the court. With this footage, no judge can ignore it. I'm predicting a special hearing within the next 72 hours. She was right. 2 days later, I walked into the courtroom with Claire beside me, gripping the USB drive that held the video. The court convened an emergency hearing with Judge Linda Wexler, known for being tough in child welfare cases. The room wasn't crowded, but the tension was thick, as if a hammer were suspended above us. Across the aisle, Mrs. Carroll appeared in a tasteful beige outfit, accompanied by her attorney, Marcus Hale, a well-known local lawyer famous for turning the tide. Jason was there too, but his eyes darted away when they met mine. Judge Wexler glanced through the file and tapped the desk lightly. "Ms. Monroe, you have new evidence, correct?" Claire stood, steady and calm. "Yes, Your Honor. This is a video from the Campbell household's own security system. It was anonymously sent to my client. The data confirms it was recorded Sunday afternoon 2 weeks ago." The judge nodded. A tech assistant plugged the USB into the courtroom screen. And then, silence filled the room as the footage played before everyone's eyes. No one said a word. When Scarlett's scream echoed through the courtroom, I saw Jason wince. Mrs. Carroll maintained a composed expression, but I noticed her fingers gripping the handle of her purse. The video ended. Another moment of silence passed before Judge Wexler spoke. "Mrs. Campbell, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Marcus Hale stood, his voice smooth as oil. "Your Honor, children often play rough, and Mrs. Campbell may not have fully grasped the situation at that moment." The judge cut him off, her tone sharp as a blade. "What kind of game results in a child's arm being twisted while an adult just stands a few steps away doing nothing?" Mr. Hale faltered. Mrs. Carroll remained silent. Claire seized the opportunity and delivered the final blow. "We request an immediate suspension of all contact between Mrs. Campbell and Scarlett until the investigation is complete. We also request a psychological evaluation of Evan Campbell and a review of Jason Campbell's custodial responsibilities." Judge Wexler took notes, then spoke clearly. "The request is granted. I hereby order all contact between Scarlett and Mrs. Carroll Campbell is to be suspended. Evan Campbell shall undergo an independent psychological evaluation. Jason Campbell is permitted visitation only at the Family Monitoring Center." The gavel dropped. The hearing ended. I felt like I had just made it through a storm, drenched but still standing. In the hallway, Jason quickly approached me, whispering, "Penelope, I didn't think it was this serious." I looked at him, not even angry. "You didn't know because you never listened. But now, the court has, and Scarlett, our daughter, will never have to suffer in silence again." 3 weeks after the emergency hearing, the Redwood County Court held an official trial to determine my custody of Scarlett. This time, there was no silence, no fear, and no shadows left for anyone to hide behind. The courtroom was packed. Local media filled the benches, reporters scribbled away, cameras waiting to capture every flicker of emotion. News of the case had spread across the state after the video footage was authenticated by an investigative journalist. The public began asking, what is the Campbell family really trying to hide? Mrs. Carroll arrived at court as composed as ever. Cream blazer, pearl necklace, perfectly styled hair. But this time, her icy presence didn't intimidate anyone, because now people had seen it for themselves. She stood by and did nothing as a child was hurt. The first to testify was Miss Mallory, Scarlett's music teacher. "Scarlett used to be an energetic, creative student," she said firmly. But after each weekend with her paternal family, she became withdrawn, anxious around boys, and avoided interaction. I filed a report with the school back in March. Next was Dr. Megan Bell, the psychologist. "Scarlett exhibits classic symptoms of prolonged psychological trauma," she stated. Most notably, she feels disbelieved, silenced, and blamed for her own suffering. On the other side, attorney Marcus Hale stood up to argue. "With all due respect, Your Honor, children have vivid imaginations. We cannot draw conclusions based on subjective accounts. My client, Mrs. Carroll, is a devoted grandmother. A devoted grandmother does not stand idly by while her granddaughter is being assaulted," Judge Wexler interrupted, her voice cold as steel. The courtroom went still. When Mrs. Carroll took the witness stand, she maintained her practiced composure. "I love Scarlett as if she were my own grandchild," she said. "But she's very sensitive. She often starts conflicts with Evan, takes his toys, then cries. We've been teaching her that in a conflict, you must own your part. So you mean, Claire asked calmly, that being abused is somehow the child's fault? I wouldn't call it abuse. Kids roughhouse. A little scrape is a life lesson. Claire slid a photo of Scarlett's bruised arm onto the table in front of her. Is this what you'd call a little scrape, Mrs. Campbell? Mrs. Carroll glanced briefly before turning away, but everyone saw her hand begin to tremble. Jason, and Scarlett's father, was called next. He looked more worn down than I'd ever seen him. Do you believe your daughter? Claire asked. Jason lowered his head. I don't know who to believe anymore. My mother always said Evan was a good kid. Let me ask again. Do you believe your daughter? He looked up. At me, then toward Scarlett, sitting in the adjacent room with a social worker. I believe her, Jason said. I was wrong not to listen to her. That was the only moment during the entire trial that gave my heart the slightest sense of relief. Just the slightest. After all witness testimonies were complete, Judge Wexler sat in silence for a long time, her fingers tapping the wooden gavel softly. Then she looked directly at me. Mrs. Penelope Jameson, you have presented substantial evidence, along with consistent testimony from expert witnesses, the school, and even the child's father. She turned toward the opposing side. The Campbell family, with influence, status, and power, believed they could control the narrative, but this court does not operate on reputation. It operates on justice. The ruling was spoken slowly, clearly, each word landing like a hammer to my chest. This court grants full custody of Scarlett to Penelope Jameson. Jason Campbell is permitted supervised visitation at the Family Support Center following completion of a mandatory parenting course. Carol Campbell and Evan Campbell are indefinitely prohibited from contacting Scarlett until further order of the court. I exhaled, for the first time in months. The gavel dropped. News of the hearing spread in less than 24 hours. Headlines ran bold across the media. Campbell family loses custody after abuse footage surfaces. Single mother wins landmark case exposing the silence within the wealthy. I wasn't seeking fame. I didn't want to be the face of any movement. I only wanted one thing, for Scarlett to be safe. And finally, she was free. 3 weeks after the final hearing, I received a short email from the legal office representing the Campbell family. Just 2 lines. Evan, Campbell has now been enrolled at Franklin Ridge Boarding School in Vermont. The family has no further comment regarding the matter. Franklin Ridge, I Googled it. A specialized academy for children with behavioral disorders, nestled in a small town surrounded by fiery red maple trees in autumn. The program lasts 2 years, focusing on intensive behavioral therapy and social skills development. They developed. I didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. Evan is still a child despite the harm he caused. But maybe, for the first time in his life, he'll learn that boundaries are real, and cruelty isn't instinct. It's a choice that comes with consequences. The second update came more unexpectedly. Jason. One evening in mid-December, I was arranging flowers in the kitchen while Scarlett colored at her desk. My phone rang. It was his number. I hesitated but picked up. Penelope. Jason's voice was lower, slower than I remembered. I know nothing I say now can undo what happened, but I'm in therapy. Really. I left the family firm, and I want to meet just you, to apologize, the way a father should. I took a few days before agreeing. We met at a small cafe, warm yellow lights glowing, soft jazz playing in the background. Jason looked different, thinner, silver at the temples. But what stood out most wasn't his appearance, it was his eyes. No arrogance, no defensiveness. I let my mother influence me too much, he admitted. I thought siding with her meant protecting the family. But in the end, I let our daughter get hurt. I didn't respond, didn't need to. I just nodded. Because sometimes the right apology won't erase the past, but it can open a different road forward. Since the trial, Scarlett has been attending weekly art therapy sessions with Dr. Bell. She no longer wakes up in fear at night. No more drawings of shadows and cages. Instead, she draws a girl in a red cloak, lantern in hand, walking through a dark forest. When I asked who it was, she said, "It's me, but this time I have light." Scarlett's language arts teacher, Ms. Dalton, secretly submitted a poem she wrote to a statewide elementary school contest. I only found out when I received an email from the organizers. Congratulations, Scarlett Jameson has won first place in the Northwest region for her poem, "I Don't Apologize." The poem will be published in this year's Voices of Children anthology. I read the poem when Scarlett handed me her printed copy. Just 8 lines, but each word felt like it poured from her soul. When I cried, they told me to be quiet. When I spoke, they said I was wrong. When I was pushed, they told me to take it. But today, I stand and shout. I don't apologize for being hurt. I don't apologize for speaking up. I don't apologize for being me. And I will never apologize again. I folded the paper, speechless. Scarlett looked up at me, her eyes uncertain. "Was that too much, Mom?" I wrapped her in my arms and whispered, "No, sweetheart, you said it perfectly. And I've never been prouder of anything in my life." The night before the Poetry Awards, Scarlett lay in bed, holding her old stuffed bunny, Marshmallow. "Mom," she asked, "do you think Evan is learning to say sorry?" I didn't have the perfect answer, but I was honest. Maybe. Everyone learns in their own time. But the most important thing is, you don't have to carry it anymore. Scarlett nodded, peacefully. The next day, at the ceremony in Salem, I sat in the front row as my daughter stepped on stage, her red bow glinting, her face glowing. When Scarlett read her poem, the room went silent, and then erupted in applause. And I understood. My daughter didn't just survive. She won. The following spring, as cherry blossoms bloomed along the path near Scarlett's school, I began to write. Not letters to the court or testimony for lawyers, but my own story. Every paragraph, every line, every time my fingers hit the keyboard, I cried. But through those tears, I breathed. I titled the blog "Holding On to the Light," because just like Scarlett had said that day, I don't need someone to pull me out of the dark as long as I have a light. Within the first 2 weeks, the first post, when they told my daughter to apologize for being hurt, was shared over 12,000 times. I received emails from mothers in Idaho, handwritten letters from a grandmother in Texas, and emotional messages from a young Asian American girl in Chicago who had once been told by relatives to endure for the sake of peace. They didn't just read, they spoke up. A week later, I was invited to speak at the Northwest Child Protection Conference in Portland. I wasn't used to public speaking, but Claire, always my unwavering companion, held my hand right before I stepped onto the stage. "Hen, you don't need to be a speaker, just a mother who dares to tell the truth. That's strong enough." I shared my story not as a victim, but as a witness. A testament that even when truth is buried, it will find its way to the surface, if someone believes in the light. After the conference, I accepted an invitation to join the Parent Advisory Council for Traumatized Children under Oregon's Youth Protection Organization. I began working alongside psychologists, lawyers, and teachers. People who once felt like a distant system now became teammates. And Scarlett, like a quiet miracle, turned her pain into something beautiful. She asked to join a children's art mentorship program at the local community center. Every Wednesday afternoon, I'd pick her up from school and wait in the bright studio room as she helped younger kids mix colors, cut paper, and paint sunshine into their drawings. One day, I watched her guide a 5-year-old boy painting a lighthouse. "Why a lighthouse?" I asked on our drive home. Scarlett smiled. "Because it's not a ship, not the ocean. It doesn't move, it just stays there and shines, for anyone who's lost, I had no words. I just took her hand and felt one more piece of my heart stitched back together. At the start of summer, a small publishing house in Seattle sent me a proposal. Turn the blog into a book. What you wrote isn't just personal, the editor said on the phone. It's a map for women who've been forced into silence. A reminder that motherhood doesn't mean sacrificing your voice or your dignity. I took a few days to decide. Revisiting every painful detail for a book seemed overwhelming. But then I looked at Scarlett, the little girl who once curled up in fear, now sitting at the table writing a comic about a heroine with a lantern glowing from her palms. I said yes. The book launched in early fall, titled I Don't Apologize for Protecting My Daughter. The first signing was held at a small indie bookstore in town, where I used to illustrate children's books. A young mother came forward, holding the book with trembling hands, her daughter by her side. I just filed for a restraining order against my ex because I read your blog. We didn't say much else. We simply hugged, in a silence deeper than words. That winter, Scarlett was invited to speak at a charity event for emotionally abused children. On stage, under soft lights, she read her poem, I Don't Apologize Again, this time with 2 new lines. Now I paint with colors so bright, and I know my voice is the best thing I have. The entire room rose in applause, and I knew we hadn't just come through the storm. We were living fully beyond it. One spring afternoon, with a chill still in the air but tiny green buds appearing on our windowsill, I sat at my easel, finishing the last brushstrokes on a special illustration for a new children's book, inspired by Scarlett. In the picture, a young girl stands in a foggy forest, holding high a glowing lantern. Beneath the image, a single line reads, The brightest light sometimes comes from the darkest place. Scarlett is 10 now. She no longer flinches when strangers approach, no longer wakes in terror from loud noises at night. Every evening, we share a simple ritual. We each name one thing we're grateful for that day. What are you grateful for today? I asked, as the 2 of us baked banana bread for tomorrow's breakfast. Scarlett rested her chin in her hand, then grinned playfully. I'm grateful I got to redo my poem, I Don't Apologize, for the new book, and that I'm not afraid anymore. I froze for a moment, my heart wrapped in something warm and wordless. Not because of what she said, but because of the healing I saw in every smile she gave. Every now and then, I still saw Jason. After a year of consistent personal therapy and parenting classes, he had begun having short, supervised visits with Scarlett at the Family Support Center. I haven't forgotten what happened, but I also understand that sometimes growth begins with a hard fall. One afternoon, after his visit with Scarlett, Jason walked up to me with a folder in his hands. I wrote down everything, what happened, how I really felt, and submitted it to the center. This is a copy for you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know. I've learned how to listen. I took it. I didn't promise anything. But I didn't close the door either. Our life now isn't glamorous, but it's full in the simplest, truest way. Sunlight in the kitchen each morning, Scarlett humming movie tunes while doing homework at night. The things I once took for granted now feel like treasures. Peace. I kept writing. I kept accepting invitations to speak at panels and conferences. Some were large, like national summits. Others were small, just a conversation in a school's multi-purpose room. But wherever I spoke, I always repeated one thing. No one should have to apologize for speaking up to protect their child. No one should ever regret saying no to toxic silence. One afternoon, Scarlett came home beaming. My teacher said I have a talent for storytelling, she announced. I'm writing a comic about a superhero named Lanternia. She glows when she's angry. But her light is only used to help people find their way out of the dark. I raised my brows. Lanternia? You came up with that? Scarlett nodded. But I got the idea from you. I laughed. Sometimes kids say things that melt your heart like butter. Another night, We lay in the backyard watching the stars, a new tradition since everything happened. Scarlett suddenly asked, "Mom, what would have happened if you hadn't spoken up that day?" I was quiet for a moment, then answered, "Maybe you'd still be hurting. Maybe I'd still believe it was all in my head, and we'd keep living inside an invisible box called silence." But I turned to her. "We didn't choose that box. I opened it, and you stepped out with me." Scarlett giggled and whispered, "I think I'd choose to scream too, like you." I squeezed her hand, heart full. We're not perfect. We're not strong every moment. But we're not afraid anymore. The journey from doubting ourselves, from being forced into silence, to finally standing up for the truth. It wasn't just Scarlett's fight. It was a path for every mother, father, sibling, whoever stayed quiet when they should have spoken. Now, every story I tell, every word I write, is no longer just for my own healing. It's to pass that lantern to someone else who might need it. And if you've made it this far, remember this. You never have to apologize for protecting someone you love. And you should never apologize for speaking up. Penelope and Scarlett's story is a powerful reminder that silence should never be the price of safety. In a world where influence and reputation can sometimes bury the truth, one mother's courage lit the path to justice. This isn't just a journey of protecting her daughter. It's a voice for thousands of families in real life. A message that they are not alone, and that speaking up to protect a child is never something to be sorry for. What do you think about Penelope's journey and her brave decision? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more moving and meaningful stories about family life.